Have you ever had to give up something that you thought you couldn't live without, only to realize you are the most important thing? And if one day the person you live with heartlessly breaks everything, will you continue to pick up the pieces, or will you let go to find yourself again? I was Cassidy, and that day I had begun my perfectly planned drama. I had spent 8 months orchestrating this trip to Bali, a last-ditch effort to salvage what was left of us. I had booked an isolated island resort, splurged on business class tickets, even secretly arranged a meeting with a Swiss marriage counselor. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my white dress over my hip, my packed suitcase waiting by the door like a loyal friend. I was ready, or so I thought. Connor drove up in his shiny black car, the one we'd bought together after his first big court victory. I stepped outside, the San Diego sun momentarily blinding me, and pulled my suitcase toward the curb. But then he stopped. The window rolled down, and his voice hit me like a block of ice. "I'm not going with you, Cassidy. Tessa is coming instead. She's waiting at home." Tessa, the 24-year-old intern I'd mentored years ago, the one I'd taught how to draft internal reports, the one I'd praised for her quick wit. I froze, my hands gripping the handle of my suitcase so tightly my knuckles turned white. He didn't even look at me, just pressed the gas and drove away, leaving behind the smell of exhaust and humiliation that burned hotter than the midday heat. The sun beat down, pinking my shoulders, the sound of his engine echoing in my ears long after he disappeared around the corner. My suitcase was still there, mocking me, the wheel stuck in the gravel as if it knew we weren't going anywhere. "I'm not crying," I told myself afterward. I just had nothing left to give. The truth is, I poured everything into him, into us, and now I'm empty, a shell standing on a suburban sidewalk while the life I built has passed away with someone else. For years, Connor and I were San Diego's power couple. He was a brilliant lawyer, winning memorable victories for tech giants in high-stakes litigation. I was the director of internal communications for a leading tech corporation, a job I loved until he convinced me to quit to help the family. We lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay, drove Teslas, and appeared in local magazines like the kids of success. But after 12 years of marriage, the spark between us had died. Silent fights and growing distance were all that remained. The kind of rift you can't fix with a new car or a fancy address. And the kind of person, patient, the planner. That's why I spent months in Bali. Every reservation, every flight, every hope pinned on that trip. Connor barely cared. He nodded when I told him, of course, his eyes already elsewhere. Standing there, abandoned, my mind drifted back to where it all began. Our first place in Ocean Beach. A tiny apartment where the windows stuck and the refrigerator was too loud. I'd come home in a state of euphoria after signing my first big PR deal, and Connor had picked me up and spun me around until we fell over laughing on the sagging couch. Back then, he'd looked at me like I was a prize, not a stepping stone. Back when I'd quit my job, his idea, his gentle nudge. "We'll be stronger for it," he had said, but that day his eyes had passed me by, as if I had become part of the decoration. I wasn't his mate anymore, I realize now. I was his prop, the backdrop to his spotlight. Our marriage had been like a glass house we'd built together. Shiny, enviable, a perfect view for everyone to see from the outside. But what about the inside? Cold, sterile, the kind of place where every word echoed and every touch felt like it might crack the walls. I spent years polishing that glass, keeping it intact, while he chipped away at it piece by piece until Tessa came along and shattered it. The heat weighed on me, relentless, as I stood there in that white dress, ironically like some weird bridal moment gone awry. Have you ever kept a home that looked perfect to the outside world, but was cold and lonely on the inside? If you had to choose between continuing to endure or letting go to find yourself, what would you choose? Sweat beaded on my forehead, trickled down my back, the fabric clinging to my skin like a layer of shame, letting go even as the sun rose higher and the world spun without me. Tessa's face flashed in my mind, her bright smile, her eager nod as I showed her how to do things. She had been my project, and now she was his escape. The betrayal wasn't just Connor's, it was hers too, a double-edged sword that spiraled deeper with every breath. I had given up everything for him, my career, my independence, my dreams, thinking it would bind us closer together. Instead, it left me here, stuck in the ruins of the life I had built for us, watching him drive off with someone new. The pain was a living thing clawing at my ribs, but I held it back, locked it away. I wasn't ready to let it win. The apartment was quiet that night, and I sat on the leather couch, our couch, the one we'd picked out after his first $1 million lawsuit, my laptop balanced on my knees. The cold light of the screen fell on me, making my skin ghostly pale. I came here to think, to breathe, but all I could do was dig. I was a planner, so I didn't flinch, not when I entered my old credentials into the company's internal system, a back door I'd never bothered to close after I'd left. A technical error. I called it at the time a small loophole I'd left open because some part of me deep down had never quite trusted Connor. My fingers moved quickly. The first email popped up, then another, then a dozen more, each one a punch in the gut. He didn't just betray me, I whispered to the empty room. He sold out the company. The messages were a jumble of flirtations and corporate betrayals. Connor and Tessa, my Tessa, the intern I'd taken on as my protege, had exchanged more than sweet words. The attachments, marked confidential, laid out the tech secrets I'd kept from my time as a communications director. Budgets, prototypes, client lists, all passed through her eager little hands to a competitor. Each click revealed more, each line a shard of glass cutting through the image I'd once held of him. Each email was a brick falling from the wall I'd built around him, I thought, picturing it crumbling, one by one until there was nothing left but rubble. I leaned back, the leather creaking under my feet, and let the words sink in. He doesn't love me, he doesn't respect me, he just uses me. Its rhythm played over and over in my head, a bitter mantra that drove my focus. I had been his foil, first as his wife, supporting his image, then as his unwitting foil while he played his game. And Tessa? She had been right there, betraying me. I remembered her so clearly it hurt. She'd come to our house once when I was still working, still mentoring her. I'd brought her a cup of chamomile tea, smiled as she fumbled with the first draft of the report. "You have a gift for this," I'd told her, proud of her quick wit. She had smiled at me, shy and grateful, and I had trusted her. Now, seeing her name next to his, giggling about the stolen files, the memory turned sour. She had sat in my house, drunk my tea, and stabbed me in the back. The wind blew outside, rattling the glass doors, but I barely noticed. My eyes remained glued to the screen, scrolling through the timeline. The late nights, the weekends, the times Connor had told me he was working on a case. Lies, all of them. The evidence piled up, a digital avalanche I couldn't stop. There were payment records, too. Hidden transfers through Tessa to an offshore account. He hadn't just cheated, he'd profited, risking everything we'd built for quick cash and a younger smile. My chest ached, a dull ache that spread with every breath, but I didn't let it take over. I'd cried enough silent tears for him over the years, silent arguments, nights when he didn't come home. Not tonight. Tonight, I swallowed the pain, let it settle in my stomach, and kept going. The steady tapping of my fingers on the keys was my anchor, my lifeline pulling me through the wreckage. I wasn't falling apart. I was building something new, knowledge, strength, a way out. I paused, staring at a photo Tessa had attached to the email, a selfie of her and Connor grinning over drinks somewhere I didn't recognize, her hair down, his arm around her shoulders, the two of them as nonchalant as ever, but inside I was changing. The pain was still there, a quiet pain I'd carried for a while, but it wasn't in control anymore. I'd suffered in silence, sifting through the ashes of our lives, and now I had everything I needed. Not to confront him, not yet, but to know who he was, and that was enough to keep me going. The air in La Jolla smelled like salt and coffee, and it was one of those places, narrow, cozy. I spotted Reed in the back corner, his big frame hunched over a small table, a half-full cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his hazel eyes narrowed, sharp enough to cut through the fog I'd been living in since Connor drove away. I slid into the chair across from him, the wood creaking under my feet, and set down my laptop like it was a loaded gun. Reed and I had a long history, old friends from my corporate days when I ran the communications program and he was climbing the ladder to vice president. He'd always had my back, and now, with the truth burning a hole in my chest, he was the only one I trusted to help me use it. The smell of roasted beans hit me as I opened my mouth to speak, but he was faster than me. "Do you want to destroy him?" he asked, his voice low, twirling that damned silver spoon between his fingers like a toy. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, and looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said, my tone steely. "I want him to destroy himself." He raised an eyebrow, but I didn't flinch. I'd spent 48 hours digging through Connor's digital trash mails, texts, transactions, and I wasn't here to vent or cry. I was here to act. Our plan is like a game of chess, I thought, picturing the board in my mind. I'm the queen, moving freely, attacking from angles he's never seen. Connor is the pawn, complacent and clueless, stumbling into a trap. I opened my laptop, the screen lit up. and began to present all the evidence I'd pulled from the company systems, all the accusations between him and Tessa. Reed listened, sipping his coffee, his expression unreadable, until I got to the part about the leaked files. Jesus, Cass, he insisted, setting his cup down with a clang. This isn't just fraud, this is corporate espionage. I nodded, sliding a printed email across the table. Connor promising internal data from a rival company, Tessa's name copied in as a gleeful accomplice. He used her to leak secrets, I said. Enough to ruin his career, possibly land him in court. Reed's spoon stopped spinning, his jaw clenched as he skimmed the page. We can bury him with this, he said, and I knew he was on board. We wasted no time. I walked him through the rest, screenshots, payment trails, timestamps matching his late nights at the office. Reed filled in the gaps with legal knowledge, his mind already racing. The Bar Association will eat him alive for this, he said, tapping the table. Ethics violations, abuse of power, his license will be revoked. And the firm? We invoked the confidentiality clause in his contract, file an internal lawsuit. He won't see it coming. I nodded, my pulse steady, a quiet fire burning inside me. I don't tremble, I told myself. No hesitation. Every move I make is a clean cut severing the last thread that binds me to him. Next came the money. I called my lawyer, technically our lawyer, though Connor didn't know it yet, and asked her to freeze our joint accounts. Every penny we'd saved together locked away with a few signatures and a cold, precise order. Reed smiled when I told him, a rare crack in his cold mask. This is gonna hurt, he said, and I allowed myself a small, wry smile. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about control, about taking back what was mine before he could squander it on Tessa and their Bali affair. The coffee shop buzzed around us, and Reed pulled out his phone, composing an email to the firm's legal team, sending it to me line by line. I sent a private message to a contact at the state bar, attaching enough evidence for them to start taking action. There were no grand accusations, no public fireworks, just quiet, deliberate steps, each tightening the noose. The yellow light through the windows softened, the day fading into dusk, but I barely noticed. Time didn't matter, results did. Are you sure? Reed asked at some point, his spoon moving again, glinting in the overhead light. Once we pull the trigger, there's no going back. I was speechless. Connor wouldn't know what had happened to him until it was too late, and that was the beauty of it. He'd think he was still winning, sipping cocktails with Tessa, while we destroyed his world from the shadows. He's the pawn, I reminded myself, and I'm the queen. Every move was mine, and I made them without question. By the time we were done, the coffee was cold, the shop nearly empty. Reed pocketed his spoon, an old habit I'd never understood, and stood up, stretching. "You're a force, Cass," he said, almost to himself. I didn't answer, just closed my laptop and tucked it under my arm. Its weight felt comforting, solid, a testament to what I had discovered and what I was about to unleash. Outside, the ocean breeze blew through La Jolla, cool on my skin, but inside I was burning, not with anger, but with purpose. Awareness turned to resistance, and I was ready to fight. Not for him, not for us, but for me. I didn't have to be there to see it all happen. Connor and Tessa were gone for a week, living it up in Bali, posting little smug stories on Instagram. Sunset selfies, the clinking of champagne glasses at a villa I'd booked for us. They came back, tanned and grinning, thinking they'd won, oblivious to the gears I'd set in motion with Reed. I was in the penthouse, alone, my silent companion as I waited for the inevitable, and when it came, I pictured every second of it, vivid as a real film in my mind. He walked into his law firm that morning, the glass tower on Broadway he'd always bragged about. I saw him in his suit, the smug stride he'd perfected in court, briefcase swinging like a trophy. The lights would flicker overhead, his shoes clicking with every step, until they stopped. The security team would wait, two guys holding up their arms like a wall. "Mr. Sullivan, your badge is inoperative," one would say, his voice flat. He would laugh, the sharp, contemptuous bark he used with his subordinates, and swipe it again. Nothing. Shit. I could see confusion flash across his face, then slow panic as they escorted him out, the glass doors of the lobby slamming shut behind him. Back on my laptop, the subject line, "Notice of termination." I'd made sure of that with Reed. The company's legal team was moving quickly after we handed over the evidence. Breach of ethical standards, it would say. Serious misconduct. No severance, no health insurance, just a brief goodbye from the firm he'd built his name on. Nobody called back, I thought, imagining his phone going dark as he scrolled through his contacts. Partners, clients, friends, all suddenly too busy to pick up. Nobody to help him, nothing. The bar association letter would follow, an official punch to the gut that arrived in his inbox as he stood in the parking lot, rain beginning to drizzle on his suit. Licensure revoked indefinitely, the letter read, citing lack of transparency and abuse of office. It was a crushing blow, his law career, the thing he'd attached his entire identity to, gone in a single paragraph. I pictured him staring at the screen, the rain blurring his phone, the gray sky of San Diego pressing down like a verdict. He was like a shipwreck in the bay, I mused, adrift in pieces, with no one to save the pieces. Everything he'd built, his victories, his confidence, his power, had sunk to the bottom, drifting with the tide. Tessa had done the math herself. I'd mailed her an envelope the day before they flew back, plain and unmarked, dropped into a downtown mailbox with a flick of my wrist. Inside, there was just one page, a screenshot of the email she'd sent Connor, a corporate file attached, her excited, "Here it is," typed at the top. My own handwriting was scrawled at the bottom in black ink. I don't need revenge. I'm just reminding you of the law. I hadn't signed it. She would know. I imagined her opening it in their hotel room, the paper crumpling in silence, her tan fading like the blood draining from her face. Maybe she'd tear it up. Maybe she'd call him in a panic, but it didn't matter. He'd blocked her. I knew he was strong enough to bet on that. She was alone now, her future as a smart young tech person snuffed out by her own greed. He's lost his job, I repeated to myself, the words flat, his reputation. Everything. The firm wouldn't touch him again. Words traveled fast in the legal world, and no one would hire someone like that. And her? She's lost her future. Tessa's name would be trash in the industry, her resume a red flag for anyone who Googled her. They would fall apart, the two threads I'd cut loose, watching them fray from afar. I didn't leave the apartment that week. There was no need. My phone was silent too, no messages from Connor pleading or angry. He wouldn't dare. Not yet, not when he was still trying to figure out how deep the hole was. I sipped my coffee, and from the weight of us, the years I'd put up with him, for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The fog rolled in slowly and gently in the morning, blanketing the pine trees outside my new house. I'd traded my apartment in San Diego for this place. A modest little house with white stucco walls, a steep roof, and windows so big they looked out onto the forest beyond. Inside it smelled of cedar and salt, the scent of a new beginning. I sat at the wooden kitchen table, a piece I'd found at a thrift store, and sanded myself, my laptop humming as the sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains. The waves lapped in the distance, a steady beat, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I hadn't gone to Bali that trip. My grand plan to get Connor and me back together had died the moment he drove off with Tessa. Instead, I took the money we'd saved, the savings I'd helped build through years of sacrifice, and bought this place. There was no penthouse view, no Tesla in the driveway, just a quiet corner of the California coast where the air was clean and the past seemed far away. The lawyer had handled the accounts, divided up what was left after I'd locked them up, and I didn't blink when I signed the papers. It wasn't about the cash, it was about the choice. My choice. This time, I wasn't following his script. The house wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a small porch, a fireplace I hadn't figured out yet, but it was mine. I moved in with a suitcase and a cardboard box of essentials, leaving most of our old life behind. No sleek furniture, no designer lighting, just a mismatched sofa and this table, the wood grain raw under my palms. I liked it that way. Raw, unpolished, a blank sheet of paper I could shape. That first night I stood by the window, watching the pine trees sway in the wind, their shadows long and dark on the floor. "This is home," I whispered, testing the words. They fit. Then came I'd left my career rusty for Connor, left the media world to support him, but I still had the skills. Strategy, writing, networking. That morning, I fired up my laptop, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen, and started making contacts. First old colleagues, then a few industry contacts I kept in my pocket. Freelance consultant, I called myself, pitching PR gigs to tech startups and small companies on the coast. The responses poured in, cautiously at first, then steadily. A Monterey-based app developer needed a launch plan. A Santa Cruz nonprofit wanted to reach out to donors. Piece by piece, I rebuilt what I'd lost. Not for him, not for anyone, but for myself. "I don't hate," I told myself, the thought sharp and clear as I typed the email. "I don't regret it, I live." The words were like an oath, a line between who I had been and who I was becoming. Back in San Diego, I was Cassidy, the wife, Cassidy, the support system, Cassidy the Shadow. Here, I was just Cassidy, full stop, no strings attached, no compromises. The laptop keys clicked under my fingers, a rhythm I'd forgotten I enjoyed, and with each project I received, I felt a little more grounded, a little more whole. I walked to the market some mornings, a canvas bag slung over my shoulder, nodding to the grizzled cashier who always asked about my day. Going well, she'd say, and I'd smile, surprised that my yeah actually meant it. The fog would lift by noon, the sun would shine on the streets, and I'd sit on my porch with a cup of coffee watching the world go by. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. A life made of quiet moments, not someone else's spotlight. The healing came slowly, like a tide smoothing rough rocks. Sometimes I found myself thinking about Connor, his laugh, his courtroom swagger, but it didn't hurt as much anymore. Tessa would flash into my mind too, smiling eagerly from her consulting days, but I would push it away, let it drift away with the wind rustling through the pines. They were ghosts now, fading with each sunrise I watched from my window. I don't owe them, I realized one morning, the thought sinking into my bones. I owe no one anything. Hills to my left and right, feeling the road stretch out below. No more penthouse meetings, no more supporting roles, just me, my laptop, and a Springsteen and Fleetwood Mac playlist. I parked by the bay, opened the billboard, and immersed myself in the work, the kind of focus I'd forgotten I could muster. No longer about proving anything to Connor, but proving it to myself. One evening, I walked to the beach, the sand cool under my bare feet, the sky a patchwork of pink and gold. The waves rolled in, steady and relentless, and I stood there, hands in my pockets, letting the salty air fill my lungs. I thought of myself as I had been planning the trip to Bali, smoothing out Connor's edges, pursuing a marriage that had fallen apart. Now she felt distant, a stranger I'd grown up with. Success. Back at home, I sat at my desk again, laptop off again, a glass of wine in my hand. The pine trees outside swayed, branches brushing against the glass, and I leaned back, letting the silence wash over me. Victory wasn't a scream or a raised fist. It was this moment, this house, this life I'd built from the ashes. I didn't need Bali. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was. I had closed the past, not with a bang, but with a soft click, and stepped into something better. It was just me, and that was enough. Perhaps in the end, the most precious thing is not the victory or the revenge, but the moment you sit still in your own space and find yourself whole. Cassidy did not win Connor back, nor did she reclaim the lost years. She just chose for herself, quietly, bravely, proudly. What about you? Is there a moment in your life that made you start over like Cassidy, late but bravely? Leave a comment below. Your sharing can be a great source of encouragement for those who need to find their inner strength again. And if today's story touches a part of your memory, feel free to share this video with someone you believe deserves to step out of the darkness. Because it's never too late to choose yourself again.